everyone. How are y'all doing today? I know this is a bit odd, but today I will be on the helm for both the production, quote unquote, and the moderation, which honestly, these two guys don't really need. They're both veteran debaters, veterans at having these sort of discussions of the philosophical nature. But as always, if you guys are new, please take some time to understand who our two interlocutors are. We'll start with Trey and then just move on to Floyd.
Okay. My name is Trey Jadlow. I'm a 53-year-old old man who lives in Kansas City. I'm a dental technician. I'm born-again Christian. Been a Christian over 30 years. And Floyd and I had an exchange. Was that the one that you tagged me in, Floyd? Did you?
Yeah. I started it. It was from your last show
with Christian.
It was on. Yeah, it was on here, right? It was on.
Yeah, it was the last one here.
Yeah, it was on this show.
Yeah. So we had an exchange there, and we had a discussion. Floyd said he'd like to have a discussion regarding values or the concept of value as it relates to both of our worldviews. And I said, sure. So here I am, and thank you, Drag, for having me, and Floyd for joining me as well.
Yeah, I'm Floyd FP. I've been part of the great debate community on various online formats for many years. I have a YouTube channel. I don't put a lot of content on there, but I'm on a lot of different shows. You can find me on Facebook, and I'm on Discord as well, on some of the servers on Discord. Yeah, and as Trey mentioned, we've known each other for quite a few years, and we've had a few chats here and there. And tonight we're going to talk about axiology, I believe is the term of it, which is about values. What we value. What does it mean to value things? What does it mean for something to be good and things like that? So, all right, Trey. I guess we left off of determining how how do we determine what is valuable, what we value. And I think you brought up, I forget where the issue that you brought up. Trying to remember on the Facebook. But
from my perspective, there is no such thing as value unless there's something that is eternally valuable, because value cannot instantiate out of nothing. And I think you would probably say value is something that you would say is an emergent property of the evolutionary process. That's a favorite for your camp for saying.
Yeah. Or would you agree that for something to have value, there must be a valuer?
Yes.
Yeah, so I agree with that too.
Okay. But from your perspective, is the universe personal? Because value is necessarily entails personhood, because only persons value things.
Right, I'd agree with that. Yeah, right. You word it differently, but I said the same thing. For something, there must be a valuer, i.e., a person or some sort of being, to be able to value something. So, if there's no valuer, nothing has value.
Right. So from your perspective, is the universe valuable?
Yeah, so I think we need to distinguish between
the noun and the verb.
No, two kinds of values. There's intrinsic value and there's instrumental value. And instrumental value is something that has value as a means to some other end. For example, a hammer is valuable for the means of having a nail in the wall to hang a picture, for example. Or a knife is valuable because it gives us to be able to cut things and so forth. So those are instrumental.
Yeah, but the instrumental value, though, really doesn't have its foundation in the instrument, but it has its in the efficiency or in the final causality and the fourfold causality of Aristotle. So the instrument is used, but you've got to have a final cause, which is a telos, or the purpose. And the purpose is only useful for an efficient cause, which would be basically in the same category as instrumental, only it has ultimate causal ability. Because you would agree, the hammer by itself cannot do anything. It's an instrument. It doesn't have force in and of itself to go towards some particular end or goal.
Right. It has value to the valuer, like we mentioned previously.
Right. So the valuer is the efficient cause, and really what we're discussing right now is the efficient cause. And how do you justify efficiency in an impersonal universe? That's my problem. Right.
Well, again, what is a value is to the valuer. So there's intrinsic value. What an intrinsic value is that it doesn't have value as a means to something else, to a goal, but in and of itself has value. So in my worldview, that would an example of that would be happiness. So happiness is valuable in and of itself. There's nothing beyond that. You can't say happiness has value for something else. No, happiness is valuable in and of itself. So, so I guess your issue is that the universe has to be personal for there to be values. Why can't something be valuable just to the persons that exist within the universe, namely us and other living beings?
That's actually what I'm saying. Does the universe substantiate value?
I'm not sure we need to substantiate value.
No, so, instantiate. Does value express itself in the universe? When I say is the universe personal, I'm saying, do you, Floyd FP, do you value things?
Yeah, I certainly value things, yes.
Okay, so the universe is personal.
No, I'm personal.
And you're part of the universe, right?
Right, so parts of the universe are personal.
Yeah,
right?
I'm just saying, does value exist in this universe? This universe is a personal universe. It's a kind of a universe that actually has goal in it.
Yeah, the beings in the universe have goals.
Okay.
Yes.
Now the question is, how do you justify those beings being valuable unintentionally?
Well, things that have instrumental values, have value because, they serve some sort of need, want, or desire of the valuer, namely us.
Or have value because
there's
they serve some sort of
DPR.
Want or desire.
You need to turn your sound off, DPR.
I think you need to kill the YouTube feed, DPR. There you go.
There we go. Excellent. He just muted himself. Anyway, so the question is, how do you justify? You're just explaining. Yes, value exists because that's how things are. I'm not asking that question. I'm asking, how do you justify the emergence of value, which is intention, unintentionally? You say the universe is impersonal, and then it becomes personal. And I need you to show me how exactly that can happen according to the principle of proportionate causality.
Again, we evolved in the universe to become what we are. We have needs, wants, and desires. So our very nature determines what is valuable to us.
Okay, Floyd, you're just giving me a just so story. I know that we are valuing people. That's not part of the question. That's not what I'm asking. I'm asking, how do you justify the emergence? How did value come to instantiate in you unintentionally when value, by definition, is intentional?
Well, we don't need a rational justification for what we value. We have a cause. We have a cause for what we value.
Okay. Do you believe in the principle of proportionate causality? That something cannot impart something it itself does not have?
I'm not familiar with that. If you can explain it to me.
Oh, okay. It says that basically when you're looking at some causal relationship between something else, that thing that causes the effect, there must be some correspondence to the effect that to the cause. So, for example, I always like to use the example of rocks cannot create philosophical societies. Would you agree with that?
Yes, sure.
Okay, according to the principle of proportionate causality. Now, some people will say, well, I had one atheist tell me one time, he said, well, yeah, but if you look at a cornbread recipe, let's say, or the ingredients to make cornbread, you don't have sponginess within the ingredients to impart sponginess into the final product of the cornbread. But I say, indeed, you do. You have the potential for sponginess as you mix the baking powder and the cornmeal and the water. So there is that ability to bring sponginess about, even though the sponginess itself does not inhere in the ingredients. However, you do see there's a causal relationship between those ingredients and the final product. And so in the same way that we see intentionality in this universe, you cannot say that unintentional matter can somehow intend intention into existence because it is unintentional by definition. And to say that it would intend something would be to violate the law of identity, and saying that something unintentional is actually unintentional when you're defining it as unintentional.
Well, in your cornbread example, all those ingredients separated do not have the property of sponginess.
Right.
But when you mix them all together and put them in the oven, the property of sponginess emerges, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
So our needs, wants, and desires, our biological nature, emerged from previous states to where we are today. So because of our biological nature, that came about through natural selection. We have a certain nature where we try to avoid harm, suffering, disappointment. And we try to maximize happiness, fulfillment, joy, and so forth. So what determines that is our animal nature. So we don't need a normative justification for that. It's simply this raw data of human nature where we derive those values from. So again, we have a cause. We don't need a rational justification for that.
Well, yeah, we do have a cause. Obviously, every effect has a cause. But you're saying that you talked about the sponginess coming forth, from the ingredients for cornbread. But that follows the principle of proportionate causality. Can that cornbread, those ingredients of cornbread, also produce personhood?
Well, no, cornbread obviously isn't a person.
Okay, because natural selection is the process by which it happens, but it's not the justification of it. You're just saying, like, natural selection would be like mixing the bowl or something. Like the mixing of the bowl brings us about. I need you to tell me how it is that you're defining it as unintentional, and so you're saying the opposite of what something is brought forth. In other words, you have the positive attribute of unintentionality. It's just inert matter can somehow desire to bring about intentionality when it doesn't even have that. It's the opposite of that property to begin with.
Yeah. So the question is,
it just happened by natural selection, or because it just emerged. It's just a just so story. It's a Rudyard Kipling story. It's not science.
Well, yeah. So basically, the question you're asking for, and I think it's a very interesting question, is where does desire come from?
Right.
How did?
Could I just interrupt very briefly?
Sure.
I don't want to interrupt the conversation because I think it's very interesting, but I'm struggling somewhat with the definition of desire that you were using.
Floyd or me?
Both of you.
Something we crave, we want.
Well, Floyd, how about this? We just say that when we say desire, we're talking about a goal in mind. Teleology is what we're arguing right now. There is a purpose or a goal to something, purpose, if you will, intentionality, that there's intention to move to a certain place. So the fact that I desire to engage in this conversation with my friend Floyd is I have the end result, and I want to do something, and I hope that I can be more enlightened, or that I can maybe share some ideas or something like that. How does something like that instantiate in an impersonal universe? Because impersonality is not personal. And so what I'm wanting to know is how something like that can emerge. It's like you're saying that a wood, if you put a pile of wood and a pile of glue together, something like that, how can it somehow produce desire? If you have inanimate material, how can it bring forth desire when it is unintentional by definition? And in order to have intentionality, to bring it for intentionality to be an effect, it must be intended. It cannot be unintended, because unintentionality cannot intend by definition. And so when we say desire, we're talking mainly about goals or intentionality, the very thing that instantiates particularly most clearly in human beings, although we can see it in several biological organisms in this universe.
Right. So, it comes down, how does intentionality arise? How does desire arise? According to evolutionary story, life started out as a single cell. So, what made it so where amoeba squirms towards a little piece of, I don't know what to eat, pollen or something, and surround it to ingest it? How did that come about? I'm not a biologist. I'm not even sure if biologists have an answer.
No, they don't. It's more of a metaphysical question. It's more of a philosophical question. And this is, I'm sorry, go ahead, Floyd.
Yeah, but I would say, obviously the universe had potential for that to emerge at some point.
And I'm asking you to explain that potential. In other words, the justification for that potential.
Yeah, well, I'm just going to offer a just so story at that point.
Okay, yeah, and that's the problem.
Yeah, well, I mean, so where does intentionality come from the Christian worldview? Just
from God.
Right?
God is nothing can instantiate here on this universe, and this would be like a Thomas Aquinas's fourth way. It's an argument from Degree. If we see something instantiate here on this earth, there must be, and it's going to be Christian. I'm a Christian Platonist too, so it's got to be I'm a realist. It cannot instantiate out of nothing. There must be something that gives it, for anything, happiness, love, justice, any of these. This is what Socrates was going around and asking everybody, what is justice? And they'd say, well, and they would give an excellent example of it. He says, no, I'm not asking for example. I say, what is justice itself? And so from my perspective, any of these things that we see are going to be ideas in the mind of God. I think it was Charles Barkley that said that, to perceive is to be, S percipi, to be is to perceive. And many people misunderstand and think he thinks everything's illusion. That's not what he was saying. He was saying that something must be perceived in order to have reality, and it's a form of realism in this universe that we have. And I had another point, and I forgot what I was going to say, but it'll probably come to me here in a minute.
So basically that's your just so story. I mean, imagine if I asked,
it's not just so story, it's a justification. It's a reasonable justification. You're just saying it's just that way. I'm saying, no, you cannot have an instantiation of a contingent being or an example of something without a perfect cause, an efficient cause to give it that within us.
Well,
here's what I want to say. Let me finish this real quick before I forget. Mm-hmm. So the problem that we have today is when we had the scientific revolution with early modern physics, you had Aristotelian physics, which was bad. Aristotle's physics were faulty. And so what happened is you had Isaac Newton come along with his early modern physics of what we have today. And essentially, it was generally material. What you're doing is you're looking at one piece of matter affect another piece of matter. And what they did, and they threw out two parts of the fourfold causality for Aristotle. They threw out the formal and the final cause. The formal cause is going to be that which drives it. It's like the instruction, or that would be the perfection that gives instantiation to the example. Like for my humanity would be an idea in the mind of God. There's no formal cause and there's no final cause. There's no purpose. I don't know if you ever heard this. They always say this in evolutionary circles. You have to do away with all purpose, because there is no purpose, because everything is random and it's just natural selection, just choosing things kind of randomly. And in doing this, we really cut our arms.
Natural selection isn't random. I mean, they're like genetic drift. Well,
but there's no
mutation would be random. Right. There's no goal in mind. Kent Hovind had a straw man evolution that we're evolving to become more and more and more perfect. No, that's not the case at all. It's just if you're able to reproduce, then your genes just simply continue on, and there's no guarantee that when the climate changes 3,000 years from now that we're still going to be around. Just those who have the nature to survive that environment will continue on. So yeah, there's no conscious plan or goal when it comes to evolution.
Right.
But
well, let me finish this real quick. So with the emergence of early modern physics, with Newtonian physics, we basically just looked at things in matter, and we saw how this piece of matter interacts with another piece of matter. And then we had around that same time, we had the Humean revolution, where he brought radical skepticism with empiricism, and then we had Kant come into the picture, who wanted to bring a synthesis between reason and empiricism, and he basically said that we can't really know anything for sure, but if we could know something, what would we have to know? And he said that the thing that we'd have to know, the only thing that we can know, is the things that we can experience with our senses. And so what he ended up doing is, you may have heard me talk about this, is that he relegated God and the self, our own self, our metaphysical self, our self that we outside of our body, our personhood within us, and the essence of things, into this realm we call the noumenal realm. And what he basically did is he took metaphysics and he threw it off the table. And what that did is that took away all purpose, again, with the Newtonian revolution, and it takes away any inquiry of anything that we cannot experience directly with our senses. And this is where we see the birth of scientism the way we see it today. And so it's my contention that since the Enlightenment, we've been flying around with one wing, because we have all kinds of wonders that we can see with science. The scientific revolution was a wonderful thing, and it's given us many wonderful things, but it has taken away our purpose. We're not allowed to ask those questions. We're not allowed to deeply inquire of those things. But basically, just like you admitted, we're relegated to the just so story about value. The value is really more or less an illusion.
Do you mind? I'm very hesitant to interrupt your incredibly interesting conversation. But could you just explain your last point about purpose?
That we're not allowed to speak of anything as if it is purpose. So when you're doing science today, you're not, as Floyd just conceded this, you're not allowed to ask why as a part of the inquiry that we're doing with science, because all we're doing is looking at matter. We're not looking at purpose. We're not looking at something, because personhood. This is why most evolutionists are they're hard determinists. Because they have to justify their view just by physical matter in and of itself, and to conceive.
I'm terribly sorry to cut through you, but could I add to that? Why should there be purpose?
Well, I don't think anybody doubts that there is such a thing as purpose. That's what we're talking about here. Floyd has conceded that he purposed to have this conversation, that purpose does indeed instantiate in this universe. So the question is not so much, I think, I'm not sure what to call you, DPRs, that's what I call you. I think what we want to do is, what you're wanting to say is not does purpose exist at all, but you're probably thinking of, is there a purpose in the final analysis? Does that be more exactly what you're asking?
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. No, and also I didn't think that Floyd actually agreed with you about purpose. Purpose, so far as I'm concerned, is that there is some sort of end result that we're looking at.
Yeah.
And I don't accept that. If you do, please explain.
Okay.
What is this purpose, and what is its end result that you think it should meet?
Okay. Well, do you have a purpose in this conversation?
Oh, I have no problem at all. I was brought in at the very last minute, and I would have introduced myself more thoroughly if I'd had the chance. I have no doubt or no problem in admitting I am an atheist. I have known Floyd, not particularly personally, but I've spoken to him on many occasions and hangouts and whatever. As I say, I'm an atheist, and I agree. There is actually nothing that Floyd has said in all the years that I've communicated with him or listened to him that I do not agree with. So that's my position.
But
I think it's only fair. It's only fair for me to put that forward to you.
No, I appreciate that. And what I want to ask you though is, do you have a goal in having? Why are you here? Let me ask you that. Why are you here? You were asked because you were asked to. But do you have a desire to learn something by sitting here?
Yes.
Okay, so that's your goal. That's your purpose. There's purpose right there.
Yeah, I kind of guess that is. But as I say, I wanted to express the fact that I do appreciate the fact that I do have a bias.
Yeah.
You
want to be here, DPR, right? You want to be here. You're not here because drag twist your arm, right? You want to be here, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So you have a desire. You have a desire to be here. You want to be here.
But DPR, the goal that you have, I would assert, for your being here tonight is the sanctity of existence. You want your life and the life of this universe to be better, and you feel like by being here that you can do that. Would that be a fair assessment?
I don't think it would, because I think there is a limitation on how much you can improve the world we live in.
One modicum.
Sorry, go on, please.
No, I'm saying just one. I'm not saying you have to change the world I'm just saying one little instance. You would love to help somebody. If you go and you see someone and you see a child and you can buy a balloon for that child and you think, oh, I'll go buy a balloon. The reason you do that is because you want to make the world a little bit better. We all do. That's how we live our lives. And we may not be very good at it.
I don't think buying a balloon necessarily makes the world a better place.
It does for that child.
But I would agree with you entirely that I want to make people's lives better, which is why, for example, for many years, I did a annual charity event for Doctors Without Borders, which I think is a absolutely wonderful charity, non-religious, in that it's the people it seeks to help. It doesn't matter what religion they are, but the people that work for them, it doesn't matter to them what religion they are. Now, how wonderful is that? And how wonderful is it that I think well, not me, that would be far too arrogant, but the broadcasts that I did and the people that helped managed to raise $150,000, I think it was, and I know that money is going to make the world a better place.
Right.
So, I don't know whether that answers your question about purpose.
Well, I'm wanting to answer your question and have you answer it, because so you would agree.
When you talk to me, Trey.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. So let's try to get back onto the topic. So I think we're going astray a little.
Well, I just wanted to be clear if people are not understanding what we mean by purpose or goal, and
right. So it seems like what you're asking is, how did purposeful beings, beings that have goals, desires, intentions come from an impersonal universe? I mean,
and you agree, Floyd, that you do have goals, right?
Oh yeah. Okay. So, I mean, that's an interesting question. But as far as values are concerned, I would say simply, values come from our nature. Now, what's the source of our nature? Well,
because we're determined, right, for that. We've been determined to value, right?
Yeah, I mean, what brought us about with the source of our nature gave us those needs, wants, and desires.
You need to
So-
justify determination indeterminately. That's my problem.
Yeah. So I mean, so you could argue, well, the source or nature is some mirroring of of God or something, but I would simply say the source of our human nature just comes from natural selection, from reproductive successes that operate over selective pressures in the environment. So, but regardless of the source of our nature, regardless if we come from a God or we come from impersonal forces that brought about reproductive successes that brought about humans, it's our nature itself which determines the values that we have in common. So so that's my answer. So I don't think that's really controversial. We'll disagree of the source of how we came about and so forth. But
whole thing, you're just saying that's just the way it is. It's just a story.
Well, let me ask you. We have consciousness. And so consciousness arose in life where we're conscious. In your worldview, where did consciousness come from?
God is conscious. I'm not sure why that's the truth. That seems fairly trivial.
Right. So I'm asking. So let me ask you the question again. Where did consciousness come from?
Consciousness, in the ultimate sense, is self-existent. I'm not sure what you're asking.
So you're giving me a just so story. It just is. It just
no.
exists.
I'm saying it exists eternally. Therefore, it instantiates contingently within the universe.
Yeah. So there was always consciousness, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So it never really came about. It was always there.
Well, if it came about, then you'd have to explain what brought that about, right?
Right. I mean, something.
So it doesn't. So to say that it is an effect, you still have to explain the cause, right?
Right. If you want to know where it came
and I'm
from,
explaining the cause, am I not?
No.
How am I not?
What caused consciousness again?
Yes. I'm saying God, who is eternally self-existent.
But God has consciousness, right?
Yes.
Yeah. What was the cause of God's consciousness?
If it were caused, then it would be an effect, right?
Right.
Okay. So how is that giving an answer to the question? You're just pushing it back a step.
Exactly. That's my point.
You're the one that's pushing back. I'm not. I'm answering it.
Okay. Let me ask you the question again. What caused consciousness?
When you talk about consciousness, you're talking about contingent consciousness within this universe, right?
No. I'm talking about consciousness, where in general.
It must instantiate self-existently, otherwise it would not exist.
So you're saying it wasn't caused, right? It
Okay.
wasn't caused. Consciousness just is, you're saying, right?
Yes, in the ultimate sense, yes.
Yeah.
And then it caused within us. We have the examples here. So you got the universal and you got the example.
Yeah. So you're saying, so you're giving me a just so story. It's just
it's
just the case. You're saying it's just the case. You're not offering explanation.
I am. I am giving you the cause. You're saying I don't know.
Let me ask you once again. What's the cause of consciousness?
Cause of consciousness. I'm not sure what you're saying, because all you're doing is you're clouding it. You're violating.
You said you have an explanation of where consciousness came about, and you're saying it was caused.
When I say it came about, I'm talking about in the contingent instantiation. God just is. He cannot be.
Right. He's just is. So and he's consciousness. So consciousness just is. Right.
Right. And it didn't.
So you're complaining that I have a just so story.
Yes, because you're saying it arose out of nothing, Floyd. I'm not. Right? You see the
no. I'm. What exists today came from previous states.
Nothing. No, it was unintentional. It was zero for intentionality, right? And it was positively unintentional.
Well,
right?
it would have to have it would have the potential to create what exists today.
That's right. It has to in order to be potentially purposeful, it has to be something other than unintentional. Unintentional is a universal negative. Do you know what that is?
A universal negative?
Yeah. In logic, you've got universals and you've got particulars. in the square of opposition, if you've got every statement that you make is going to be either universal or particular. You could say all dogs have no tails, if you want to say something like that. I'm not saying it's true, but or you can say some dogs have no tails, or you can say no dogs have all tails. And so when you're talking about when you say unintentional, that is a universal. It's not like unintentionality is not like there's some intentionality and there's some not intentionality. When you say the universe is unintentional, that means the entire universe is devoid of intentionality. And then you said somehow intentionality, boom, pops into existence. That can't happen because unintentionality is unintentional by definition.
Unless it had the potential for intentionality
right. Then it wouldn't be unintentional. It would be some intentional.
Right, and that would be okay if it has a potential. If it has a potential for that to arise.
Okay, so you concede that there's something intentional eternally.
No, there's something potential. Something that has the potential for that to come about.
Right.
Just like in your worldview, right? Where did humans come from? The dust of the earth, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the dust of the earth wasn't conscious previous, right?
No, it wasn't.
No,
the dust of the earth was not. It did not exist.
Well, it existed at some point before humans.
It's not eternal.
Right, but there was previous states, and those states were not human. But from those previous states, humans emerged. Well, you're saying a God created it. I'm just saying something else created it besides your God.
Okay, is that something else personal?
No.
Okay, that's the problem.
Why is that
the flying spaghetti monster created it, and that flying spaghetti monster.
So you're saying nothing. You're saying nothing new can arise to the universe. Something. All properties of the universe had to exist eternally, or ultimately, from the very beginning.
Yes, because you can't ex nihilo nihilo fit. You can't get something out of nothing.
Well, I'm not saying that something coming out. I think that's actually logically possible, but if something always existed, I don't know, if some sort of quasi matter existed in the quantum realm, where states change to where things exist now, the universe had the potential to bring about what exists now.
Okay, well, it
didn't have to have all those properties to begin with. You can have emergent properties come.
Well, yeah, and you can have rocks create philosophical societies too. Who knows?
Only if it's changed later to become sentient.
Yeah. So there is no
obviously rocks aren't that now, but we can see through the evolutionary history that single cell organisms evolved into multi-cell organisms and so forth.
Inefficiently.
As we wrote, and as that evolved, consciousness evolved, got more sophisticated. We developed, to a point we are now, where we have language and we're self-aware and all those things. And again, that's where values come from. That's
what I think it was Louis Bornet said, that evolutionism is a fairy tale for humans. Anytime something doesn't work, you just make up a new story. It's a just so story.
Well, we have a lot of evidence for evolution, but it seems like we always our discussions always seem to go back to where did these emergent properties come from? And you just say, well, they had to exist eternally, and I say
right.
no.
They came out of nothing.
Only the potential had to be there for it to emerge later.
But the potential is an instantiation. In other words, that it had to come from something that had the capacity, and the capacity would be not unintentional; it would be some intentional. But you're saying the universe is unintentional.
I mean, to certain degrees, right? An amoeba doesn't have the same capabilities as we do. It's just one layer on top of a number.
But an amoeba is determined.
Well, yeah. I mean, the question is, where does the first life come from? Where does desire come from for that amoeba to squirm, to get that nutrients and so.
Well, even the determination of the amoeba to do something, it had to be determined toward a goal. There's teleology even in an amoeba. How do you justify that?
Well, again, the mystery is, where does that desire come from? And you're just saying, well, it always came from, but the your God doesn't have the same desires that an amoeba has, right?
Well, no, the amoeba is not God, but yes, the determination is according to how God programmed it.
Right. So something different from the amoeba was able to bring about the amoeba, right? So something not A brought about A, right?
No, they're not. There's no contradiction of being within a God, and in fact, it's a necessary corollary that the amoeba is contingent and it cannot exist unless something.
No, I'm not saying there's a contradiction. I'm just saying your God is not an amoeba. Your God doesn't have the same nature that an amoeba has.
So,
right. So a new property, a new nature came from a previous state, and that's what I'm saying.
Well, I'm not a monist. I'm not saying that the amoeba was made out of God. God made contingent creation out of nothing.
I'm not suggesting that either. I'm just saying the amoeba arose from previous states that already existed, and I think you would agree.
And
you're saying a mind requires that. You're saying a mind is required for that to come about.
Or personhood, something with goals. That's right. That's the rub, really, of what we're talking about.
Right. I really don't think that's necessary.
Okay. Well, I mean, you can be irrational all you want.
But again, we're back to values. You're saying,
I'm sorry to cut through you, but I think the conversation is getting rather circular.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Trey, if I may ask you,
mm-hmm.
and you know what my position is, so you know that I have a particular bias. What evidence do you have to support your claims?
Logic.
Floyd, do you want to respond to that?
Well, I mean, he's just simply saying a
causality.
A pre-existent mind has to exist for other minds to exist, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the question. Is that necessary? I mean, that's a just so story. It makes things easy. Where does our consciousness come from? Oh, from a previous consciousness. But that doesn't answer, like I pointed out before, where does consciousness come from? Well, it just always was there. Well, again, I'm just saying the potential for consciousness.
So you're saying it came out of nothing?
Well, Trey,
I'm saying it came from previous states.
Not saying that, but that in a way is the argument that you're advancing, and I don't want to be seen to be taking sides on this, but I've had so many conversations with theists who advance similar arguments to yours, and I find them deeply unsatisfactory. A simple question: where does conscious come from? And you're basically, so far as I understand, and do correct me if I'm wrong, you are saying, well, God always existed, God had a conscience, and he implanted it in his creations. Am I misunderstanding what you're saying?
No, that's it, basically. Yeah, it's a perspective, basically.
And again, I would ask you, what evidence do you have to support that?
The very fact that it instantiates contingently. You can't have an effect without a cause. And that's what Floyd is promoting. He's wanting to say it's not out of nothing, but he just basically says, well, it just happens. It's a just so story.
Well, our consciousness is an effect, which was all it's about.
What he has been saying at all.
We're an effect. We're an effect, and I'm saying it comes from previous causes.
Okay, were those previous causes intentional?
Some of them were, yeah. I would say that the ones closest to us coming about were.
The ones before those?
A little less, and a little less, and a little less.
Okay, give me that spark at the moment when unintentionality thought that it could intend intention.
Again, that's a mystery. So that's a problem. That's a problem where I don't. That's a problem where I don't know what the first domino that tipped over. You're
starting self
all the other dominoes.
I have to interrupt.
You're bringing up the first domino fallacy.
I'm sorry, Floyd. I have to interrupt. Trey, you seem to be claiming knowledge which I do not believe you can possibly have.
I think every child can know this.
Well, you're opening yourself up to a terrible insult from me, which I'm not going to do. But
I think, Trey, you need a simple story to help explain everything, rather than having to find out how things really
my point is this: that you claim to know that there is a God. That God implanted consciousness and other words that you have described, and despite the fact that you have absolutely no evidence, you rely on one of your previous arguments. Well, it's illogical.
Yeah, it's a God of the gaps. You're basically just presenting the God of the gaps.
I'm giving you you cannot have.
I have to say, Trey, and I don't mean to pick on you.
No,
but I find your argument totally unimpressive and unpersuasive.
You can't imagine how deflated I feel hearing you saying that.
So your smile tells me otherwise.
I have a dry humor.
Okay, let's go back to the concept of values.
Okay.
Would you say humans are intrinsically valuable in your worldview?
Yes. Otherwise, everything is valuable. Otherwise, it wouldn't exist.
Well, no, I'm saying intrinsically valuable. You know the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic, right? Intrinsic and instrumental, right? So I'm asking you, are humans intrinsically valuable in your worldview?
Yes, everything is.
Everything. So you're saying a hammer is intrinsically valuable?
Yes. Otherwise, it wouldn't exist. Of course, a hammer is an artifact. It's not a natural occurring thing. It's something that we create by violence, if you will, that we as humans make it. But yeah, you had to value the hammer to make it. But even the iron and the wood are valuable. Otherwise, they wouldn't exist.
Right. They're valuable for a purpose. I don't understand how you can say like a hammer has intrinsic value. So a hammer has value in and of itself, you're saying?
Yes. Even at the base level, the very material it's made out of is valuable. Otherwise, God wouldn't have created it.
So there's no such thing as instrumental value, you're saying? There's no such thing as that?
Well, no, there's a distinction there also. You can have the instrumental value that, for example, the hammer can be used to create a house or something like that. So there's even value added to that. But I'm saying at a base level, everything must be intrinsically valued. Otherwise, it wouldn't be.
I don't see how that follows. So cancer is intrinsically valuable.
No, cancer is in the ultimate sense, there is a purpose and a plan for cancer, but cancer in and of itself is a result of human sin. But even in that, in the overall plan of things, it does have its value or its instrumentality toward an ultimate goal.
So you're saying that's instrumental value. I'm asking you about intrinsic value. You keep on bringing up instrumental value, which I agree on. I'm talking about intrinsic value, that something has value in and of itself, not for another purpose, not a means to another end. When you say, cancer has, I don't know, you could say the cancer has the means to bring about God's goal in showing his glory. Well, that's an instrumental value.
But does God value the existence of the hammer or Floyd FP?
Well, if it's a means for his glory,
is not everything a means for his glory? All of creation.
Yeah, so that means we would be that means we have we have extrinsic value. We don't have intrinsic value at that point because it's a means for God's glory. So I'll just get to the chase right here.
Okay.
In Christianity, humans and basically all of creation are not intrinsically valuable. They're all means to an end, and that end is for the glory of God. So,
but do you understand what I'm saying, though? If something is contingent, it would not exist if it weren't for that upon which it depends in order to be. Do you agree with that?
Sure, that's what contingent means.
Okay, so then it must be valued by the causal agent, right?
Is it intrinsically valuable or instrumentally valuable?
Intrinsically, it must be valuable. Otherwise, it would not be made.
It would be made because it has instrumental value.
And he thinks that it's valuable in and of itself because he made it.
No, Trey. Think, why did we create knives? Why did we create cars? Why did we create hammers? Why did we create computers?
Yeah, but we are not God. We don't create anything. We just move things around.
Well, yeah, we take previous existing material and we bring it together.
Right.
Why did we create those things? Why did the Wright brothers create the first plane?
They didn't create it. They're just moving things around. We're not God. We're not doing the same thing God does, which it's analogous in a sense, but not really. God literally upholds us if we were not upheld for this very moment, from my perspective, we wouldn't all fall apart into nothing. We would cease to be.
Well,
it must be valuable, or it would be.
Great. Can you elaborate on that?
So you're saying God is sustaining the universe, right? He has his finger. He has his finger on the button, and he has his finger in the hole in the dam. If he takes it out, the whole dam will fall apart. You're saying something like that, right?
Well, the historic Christian doctrine is that God created the universe out of nothing. Okay, he has a creative power to do such a thing. And so not only is he the one that holds all things together, but he is the one who actually gives its existence. So even though we don't acknowledge God, we are depending on him for the very next breath that we take, not only to stay together, but to even exist because we're dependent on existence. If God were to remove his hand, we cease to exist.
God's like oxygen, you're saying.
I have to interrupt here briefly, if I may.
Sure.
And as I say, I don't want to stop the interesting conversation between the two of you, but there is an issue that I genuinely have to raise. I mean, it's an issue that I raise with all theists that I have discussed with over many years and over many YouTube videos, over many YouTube hangouts and whatever. What is the evidence that you have to support your point of view? What does that mean?
And logic. Yeah. I have the same answers all the time. It's real simple. The basic reliability.
I am proof of God.
Yeah, you wouldn't exist unless you had a creator.
I want this to turn into
okay. Floyd,
let us go into let's get back to instrumental value. So let me reword it. Okay, why did humans carve out wood and mold together metal and stick a metal head on top of the wood handle? To create. I'm sorry, I won't use the word create. To form something that we call a hammer.
You can say create. I'm just kind of being pedantic with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's because they were programmed to sanctify existence, and hammers help us to sanctify existence.
Yeah, so it was a means to an end for something else.
To sanctify existence.
We saw the value of it. So it doesn't have intrinsic value
But we're not God.
It have instrumental value.
Yes, but from God's perspective, he upholds us every moment. If he didn't value us, if we were not valuable to him intrinsically, we would not exist.
Well, yeah,
I'm
God
sorry.
created everything. That'd be a given in your worldview. I'm not disputing that at all.
Okay.
But why would he consider those things intrinsic? Is your God lacking something? Why would he? Why does your God need to create?
I didn't say he needed to, but I'm saying we are intrinsically valuable because he values.
Okay, let me ask you this.
So you,
Floyd,
we value as well.
please let me just ask this question. If God is controller of everything, which I presume you think he is, every life is sacred, which I presume you think it is, why does he allow at least 30% of babies to die in the womb before they get to 3 months old?
Because of sin.
Oh God. Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry. It's just nonsense.
Let's get back to value. So, Trey, so your God has goals, right? Does your God have goals?
Yes.
So he created stuff for those goals, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that's not intrinsic. That's instrumental. Would you agree with that?
Intrinsic, instrumental. No, it's efficient, and it's also final. I mean, you're all four of the causal relationships are encompassed in that.
Well, in value theory, there's intrinsic value and there's extrinsic or instrumental value. So that's what I'm talking about here. I'm not talking about how things came about. I'm saying we're talking about the value.
But we're coming about at every moment.
This is actualology we're talking about. So we're not talking about how things. We're not talking about cause and effect here. We're talking about value. So again, an instrumental value is something that has value because it's a means to something else, to a goal, to something. Uh-huh. We brought up the example of hammers, cars, knives. They have value because they bring about something else that we desire or want or need. So that's called instrumental value. Now there's intrinsic value, and that's what I asked you about. Intrinsic value doesn't have value as a means to something else, but they have value in and of itself. There's nothing else that gives its value. So, and you're saying hammers and cars and knives and stuff are intrinsically valuable. So that's what I'm asking you. How are they valuable in and of themselves?
Because they exist. How could they not be valuable?
Well, there's things that exist and there's things that don't exist. If they exist, then they have certain values. Okay, let's say we have a universe where they're just rocks. Mm-hmm. Right? You're saying those have intrinsic value.
Yeah, because they were created.
So
if they were invaluable, then they wouldn't be.
So your God created them because they have intrinsic value.
Yeah, they had to be valued in order, otherwise they wouldn't be. Why would he create something and not value it?
Well, that's what we're asking. Why does he create it all?
For his own glory.
Oh, for his own glory. So for another purpose. So you just conceded that he made rocks for some other ends. So it has instrumental value, not intrinsic value.
I'm not arguing with you saying instrumental value. It does, but it's also intrinsically valuable. You see what I'm saying?
No.
Okay, because yes, he has a purpose in that, and the progress through time and as things happen. Yes, there's a purpose in that, but in an ultimate sense, if it were not valuable to him, it wouldn't be. He's
So,
upholding it moment by moment.
so your God needs things. Your
I
God,
didn't say he needs them.
your God lacks things.
If he lacks things, then he is contingent.
Right. So that's how I.
He's got to be simple.
That's why you're saying makes no sense to me. Again, we're back to why does your God?
If God is
why
God,
does your God need to create anything? You're saying he needs to create things because he finds them valuable. He finds the things he creates valuable.
well, you're saying no. Essentially, what you're saying is that God cannot be volitional if he's all encompassed. If he's all satisfied, he cannot make a choice. Is that what you're saying?
If he's satisfied, he would have no need.
I didn't say he lacks satisfaction.
Well,
I never said that.
Why do we value food? Because we need it. We lack it.
Yeah, because we're contingent. I didn't say God was contingent.
Right. So yeah. So why would your God need to create anything?
I didn't say he needed to.
All right.
Nobody's ever asserted that.
So then why does it? Then why is everything he creates have intrinsic value to him?
I guess I'm not understanding your question. I mean, if it was not valuable, why does valuing something necessitate want or need, like in us?
Well, that's what instrumental value means. It brings about those purposes, which gives it value. That's why we, again, why did we create hammers? Why did we create cars? Why do we create airplanes and so forth? They have instrumental value. They're means to an end, to the goals, to satisfy our needs, wants, and desires. Why is food valued to animals? Why?
They need things.
Right.
They're efficient.
Right. They need it. That's what gives it value. It's an instrumental value. But to say food is intrinsically valuable, well, if there were no creatures around with digestive systems that need nourishment, what value would food have? Would even the term food even have any meaning if there were no creatures that required it?
Well, I'm not speaking about the contingent use of an instrumentality as you face it. I'm talking about the very existence of contingent being in and of itself. It doesn't need to do anything. It has to just be in order to be valued or valuable. The very fact that it exists demonstrates that it's valuable.
I don't see how that follows.
So do you agree that it's contingent?
Yes.
Okay. Now, does contingent being depend upon something else in order to be what it is?
Yes.
Okay. Is everything contingent?
No, I mean, there could easily be something necessary.
Okay, so there has to be something necessary in order for there to be something contingent. Now, if necessity did not uphold the contingency, would it be? Would the contingency be?
If the necessary didn't create the contingent?
No, if the necessary did not uphold the contingent, would the contingent be?
I'm not sure.
Because you said it's dependent upon the necessary in order to be.
Right. I'm not sure what you mean by uphold. What do you mean by uphold? I'm not sure.
Well, it's when necessity creates contingency doesn't become independent, right?
For its existence, no. For it to exist, it was dependent on what created it.
Okay, so it's always and forever going to be dependent, right? Otherwise, it would be necessary.
For it to exist, it was for it to exist, it would have to be dependent on what created it.
Right.
But once it exists, whatever created could die out, could go away.
Then it can be self-existent.
Its existence came about from what created it, but once
it can't be eternal once it's created, right?
Are your great-grandparents still alive?
No.
No, right. But they were necessary for you to be what you are, for you to be alive today, right?
Well, there was a causal relationship, but my great-grandparents were always dependent upon that, which ultimately the necessary being that gives them their being. And they were valuable, therefore, by definition. Otherwise, it wouldn't be. It would never have been.
Right. Right. I'm talking about what created. You're talking about what created. That's fine and dandy. But I'm talking about after the fact.
At every moment. You agree that something is created, it doesn't become necessary in its nature. Right? It's still dependent. It's forever and always dependent. And so you've got this category of necessity and contingency. And contingency is forever dependent upon the necessary.
You're dependent on your grandparents right now?
No, my grandparents were never necessary. They were instrumental, but they weren't efficient.
Right. They weren't the very first cause, but they were a previous cause to bring about you.
Right.
Once the effect is done, the cause is done.
Yeah, right? But their instruments are not efficient. That's the thing, Floyd. We're talking about some category distinctions here that you're not getting.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't see how that matters.
I'm terribly sorry. I'm not getting it either. Why were your grandparents not necessary?
When we say necessary, DPR, I'm talking about in their being non-dependent. You can't have dependent being without independent being, because you can't have what do you call it? An infinite regress of effects without causes.
Could you explain that a little bit more?
I mean, we've gone over that a number of times. I don't want to go back there. But again, when we develop new things, when we seek out things, it's for some sort of need, want, or desire, and that's what we call that having an instrumental value, because we didn't create a hammer just because we like hammers. We created hammers for some purpose, right? So if we just didn't blindly create a hammer for no purpose. We create it for a purpose. So that's why we label it as having an instrumental value.
Yeah, I don't dispute that.
It's for other things. So it's extrinsic. It's extrinsic.
Extrinsic. But
yeah.
From God's perspective, it's also intrinsic.
Yeah. Why is that? Why would God?
I've only said it about a dozen times.
So God just wants to look at things
for whatever the purpose is. The very fact that it exists, it must be valuable.
Whatever the purpose is, you said purpose, that would make it instrumental.
I mean, in the rocks have an instrumentality of just being. Even if they don't human build something with it. Mars up there is valuable by the very fact that it exists. Right, it exists right now.
Yeah, I have trouble seeing that.
Okay, you know what? We need to kind of maybe close this up.
Yeah, we've been going for a while.
At home.
Alrighty.
So,
you want to wrap it up, TPR?
Yes. Well, I would like to thank you both for a very interesting conversation. As I said from the get-go, I had a particular bias, and nothing that has been said during the course of the conversation that you've had, which is, as I say, very interesting. Nothing has changed my bias. I remain utterly atheistic, and I find, or have found, all the arguments that Trey has advanced to be rather worthless and unpersuasive. So I after this conversation remain a devout atheist, and I'm terribly sorry to say that to you, Trey, because you've been very polite, you've been very courteous, but I think that you have been utterly unpersuasive.
Well, you've been very kind, DPR, and it's very nice to meet you. And I'm grateful for this opportunity, and I'm grateful for your kind moderation for this exchange. And I want to thank you, Floyd, also. Floyd and I get along pretty well, and I appreciate him. We have our little sharp engagements sometimes, but I'm very grateful for that, and I'm grateful for the charity that he extends to me.
All right.
Floyd,
Thanks, Trey.
closing comments?
Thanks, DPR.
Okay, we'll see you guys later.
All right.
Bye.
No closing comments, Floyd?